When Omar Artan landed back in Mogadishu, something happened that nobody had planned for. Thousands of people packed into a stadium, not for a football match, for a referee. A man who had spent 11 hours in an airport corridor in Miami being questioned about a militant organization he had no connection to, before being put on a flight home the day before the World Cup he had spent his career preparing for. The sky-blue Somali flag was draped across his shoulders. Government officials greeted him at the airport with flowers. The president of Somalia called him personally and told him he was a symbol of their country's great potential. He had the right papers. He had the right visa. He was Africa's Referee of the Year. He had refereed a continental final. He had been selected by FIFA from the entire global pool of officials as one of 52 trusted with the biggest tournament on earth. Before he left home, he described the moment of his selection in terms that any lifelong football person would understand. He said every referee's ambition is to go to the World Cup. When you are selected, you feel that all your hard work was worth it. It was a moment where everything came into focus. Years of effort finally made sense. Then they turned him away at Miami Airport after 11 hours, and thousands of people filled a stadium in Mogadishu to show him he still mattered. That is one story. Here is the other one. Within hours of Artan arriving home, the Premier of British Columbia, the Canadian province whose city of Vancouver is hosting World Cup matches, made a public statement. He said Omar Artan would be welcome in British Columbia. He believes Artan should be allowed to referee World Cup matches in Vancouver. The mayor of Toronto went further. He said Toronto believes in fairness, inclusion, and giving talent the opportunity to shine. He said Artan would be welcome to referee in their city, and he said he would be writing to FIFA personally to let them know. Two cities, two Canadian officials, both saying the same thing within hours of each other. You are welcome here. That contrast, the United States turning away a FIFA-accredited referee with a diplomatic passport, Canada immediately offering him a place, is not a coincidence of circumstance. It is the distillation of everything that has defined the difference between the co-hosting nations throughout this tournament's preparation. And it is played out on the opening day of the biggest World Cup in history in a way that no promotional campaign could have scripted and no institutional statement can now undo. Here's the interesting part. The Canadian offer faces a genuine obstacle. The way the 2026 World Cup is structured, referees are not simply assigned to matches in one host country independently of the others. The officiating roster is managed centrally by FIFA. Artan can't simply travel to Vancouver and take a match because the Premier of British Columbia said he was welcome. It would require FIFA to reassign him, a decision the governing body has not confirmed it is considering. The question of whether Artan will actually referee in Canada remains open, but the fact that Canada asked, publicly, on the opening day of the tournament, while the United States had already sent him home, that fact is already part of the story. Compare it with what Canada has been building throughout this tournament. Toronto is one of 200 nationalities, not as a slogan, as a documented fact. When Canada Soccer House opened for the full tournament, free entry, no ticket required, it did so in a city where the football communities of virtually every participating nation have roots. The government's official welcome to international visitors was simple and human. Apply early, here is what you need. You are welcome. 3 words, clear, warm, and true. Mexico told the same story differently, but with equal conviction. When it became clear that Iran, a qualified World Cup nation, could not stay in the United States, Mexico said yes immediately and without conditions. The governor of Baja California welcomed Iran's team to Tijuana as if they were at home. The Zocalo Fan Festival opened its doors free for 39 days because Mexico City understood that hosting the world means giving the world somewhere to gather. The opening ceremony featured Shakira and Maná and Los Angeles Azules, not a generic international lineup, but artists with genuine roots in the culture that was welcoming everyone else. That authenticity is felt. Now look at the United States. 350,000 unsold tickets in Dallas. The fan festival for the city hosting the final canceled.
Seattle's 74-acre fan campus reduced to 4 smaller locations. An Iraqi striker held for 7 hours of phone inspection at an airport and eventually let through. An Iraqi team photographer in the delegation turned away entirely. And Omar Artan, Africa's Referee of the Year, questioned for 11 hours and sent home on the day before the opening match, while Canada offered him a stage and thousands of people in Mogadishu filled a stadium just to welcome him back. Think about what the world was watching on the 11th of June. In Mexico City, 83,000 people at the Azteca for the opening match, with the Zocalo full of supporters who got in for free. In Toronto, the beginning of a tournament that Canada has been building toward for 20 years, with communities from every corner of the world gathering in a city that genuinely reflects what the World Cup claims to be. And in Mogadishu, a stadium full of people celebrating a referee who came home without getting to do the job he was selected for.
Omar Artan said it himself. What happened has happened, and it was fate. And then he said, I promise you, God willing, I will attend the next one. That forward-looking hope from a man who had every right to feel only loss says something about the character of the people this tournament has failed. And Canada's response, immediate, specific, human, says something about the character of the co-host that has understood most clearly of all 3 nations what it actually means to welcome the world. Whether FIFA reassigns Artan to Vancouver remains to be seen, but the question has been asked, the door has been opened, and the contrast between the nation that closed the door after 11 hours and the nation that opened it within hours, that contrast is now part of the permanent record of the 2026 World Cup. Because beyond the Artan story, the evidence has been accumulating across the full 39 days of this tournament's opening chapter. And the picture it paints is consistent, specific, and impossible to explain away with a promotional statement. Start with the fan festivals. Because the way a host city decides to welcome the world's supporters outside the stadium tells you everything about how it understands what it means to host a World Cup. Mexico City's festival in the Zocalo runs free for the full 39 days of the tournament. Not ticketed, not behind a registration system, not conditional on anything. You walk to the historic center of one of the world's great cities, you find giant screens and live music and tens of thousands of people from every country represented at this tournament, and you watch the football together. That is the Zocalo. It has been that way since the 11th of June, and it will be that way until the 19th of July. Guadalajara's fan festival placed it at the Plaza Liberación, the historic plaza surrounded by the cathedral and the Degollado Theater, the heart of the city in every cultural sense. Vancouver's fan festival runs at Hastings Park, Toronto's at Fort York National Historic Site, a genuine historic landmark given over to the world for 6 weeks. Over 73% of Mexico's population identify as football fans. You don't need to manufacture enthusiasm there. You simply need to open the doors. And Mexico opened every door it had. Compare that with what happened in the United States. The fan festival that was supposed to run for the full tournament at Liberty State Park in New Jersey, the state hosting the World Cup final, was canceled before the opening match was played. Refunds were issued to supporters who had already purchased tickets to an event that no longer existed. Seattle's planned 74-acre fan campus was reduced to 4 smaller dispersed locations. Miami's chief of operations had testified to Congress that without federal funding, the consequences for fan events could be catastrophic. These were not last-minute surprises. They were the documented outcomes of a funding structure in which FIFA kept the revenue and left the operational costs with host cities that couldn't meet them. The numbers underneath all of this tell the same story from a different angle. Around 80% of hotel operators across the 11 American host cities reported bookings tracking below their initial forecasts. A hotel director in Houston said they had expected to be fully booked by the opening day and weren't. A hotel owner in Seattle reported June occupancy running 7% below the same month the previous year, before the World Cup,
before the supposed wave of international visitors that was going to transform the economic picture of every host city. 350,000 tickets for matches in Dallas sat unsold when the city council received its report. The tournament that was marketed as the most commercially successful in World Cup history opened with empty hotel rooms and unsold seats in the primary host nation. And then there is the experience of simply trying to get there. Ayman Hussein, Iraq's striker, a professional footballer attending a World Cup his country qualified for, was held for 7 hours at an American airport and his phone inspected before being allowed through. A team photographer who traveled with the Iraqi delegation was turned away entirely. Not a player, a photographer, someone whose entire role in this tournament was to document their country's participation. They went home. 39 countries are subject to entry restrictions. 4 qualifying nations, Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, have supporters who face direct barriers to attending matches on American soil.
Now hold all of that alongside what Canada has been doing. The Canadian government's official communication to international visitors was simple and human. Football is the largest participatory sport in Canada. It connects people of all ages and backgrounds. The documents you need to enter depend on whether you're a fan, a player, a worker, or a volunteer. Apply early so you don't miss your event. That is the language of a country that wants people to come. It is the language of a host. Toronto is home to 200 nationalities. Vancouver sits beneath mountains with the Pacific within sight of the stadium. These are cities that are constitutionally, structurally, culturally built to receive the world. And they have. The Canada Celebrates program placed official fan activities within 2 hours of every Canadian supporter in the country. The tournament distributed nationally, not concentrated behind ticketed zones. That decision reflects something important. It says the World Cup belongs to the whole country, not just to the 2 cities with stadiums. That instinct to spread the experience rather than concentrate it is the opposite of the instinct that produced $79 shout-out fees and dynamic pricing that raised costs by 35% across 95 of the 104 matches. What do you think this contrast means for the future of the World Cup itself? Because the 2026 tournament has now shown in real time and with measurable evidence that a tri-hosted competition does not produce a uniform experience. It produces 3 experiences, shaped by the culture, the welcome, and the operational decisions of 3 very different countries. And when you compare those 3 experiences side by side, one of them has consistently distinguished itself by understanding something the other has struggled with. That the World Cup is not primarily a commercial operation. It is a human event. Its power comes from the people in the streets and the stadiums and the public squares. From the fan who flew 10,000 miles and the local family watching on a free screen in a historic city center. When you treat those people as a revenue opportunity first and a guest second, they notice. The empty hotel rooms notice. The unsold tickets notice. The referee spending 11 hours in a corridor and then flying home notices. Mexico and Canada didn't outperform the United States because they had better stadiums or more matches. They outperformed it because they made a decision in every operational detail and every public statement that the visitor mattered, that the question of who could come and how they would be received was as important as the question of how many tickets could be sold. The Premier of British Columbia's offer to Omar was not a diplomatic gesture. It was a reflex, the reflex of a place that genuinely means it when it says you are welcome here. Omar is back home in Mogadishu. Thousands gathered in a stadium to receive him. His president called him. His country wrapped him in their flag. He said he would be at the next World Cup, God willing. That promise says everything about the man. And the Canadian politicians who wrote to FIFA on his behalf, who said he would be welcome in Vancouver, welcome in Toronto,
that fairness and inclusion and the opportunity to shine are what their cities believe in, those statements say everything about the co-host that on the opening days of the biggest football tournament in history understood most clearly what this competition is supposed to be. The World Cup belongs to everyone. Canada understood that first. Mexico understood it in the Zocalo and in Tijuana and at the Azteca. And the gap between that understanding and the experience of arriving at Miami Airport with all the right papers and spending 11 hours being asked about a terrorist organization, that gap is now part of the permanent, documented, undeniable record of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. If you found this worth your time, a like helps more than you'd think. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful football coverage, and let me know your view in the comments. I read every one. Football at this scale is never just a tournament. It's a moment in time. And 2026 has already told us more about the world around the game than any promotional campaign ever could.